I'm Sharon Stone. This is Engage.
The Orlando City Council voted for a 3-year suspension of the current review process for considering new development projects in the city's downtown historic district. The suspension was passed on a 4-2 vote. The district encompasses an 8-block swath of downtown along Orange Avenue and includes about 60 examples of notable architecture, including the 121-year-old Elijah Hand Building and the old Orlando Railroad Depot, now called Church Street Station, which dates back to the late 1800s. The district received its designation in 1980 from the city of Orlando. It's listed with 5 other historic preservation districts in the city. Orlando requires all development proposals involving alterations of the exterior of the buildings, referred to as the facade, within these districts to be put before a review board with the goal of preserving the architecture that contributes to the city's heritage and identity. Supporters of the suspension say it is an effort to stimulate new business development in a downtown corridor that has seen a proliferation of vacant spaces, one that has struggled to recover from the economic impacts of the COVID pandemic. They argue that suspending the mandatory review by the Historic Preservation Board and moving the review to the city's Appearance Review Board, which considers all downtown development projects, will streamline a process criticized as being an obstacle to rejuvenating the district. The state has weighed in from Tallahassee. In an email sent on the Saturday before Monday's vote, the Florida Division of Historic Resources threatened to revoke a certification from Orlando that allows the city to access state grant funding for historic preservation if the council voted for the suspension. Commissioner Shan Rose represents Orlando's 5th district, which includes the downtown historic district. She was one of the 4 commissioners who voted for the suspension. Rose joined Engage yesterday to talk about her vote. She doesn't think there's anything wrong with historic preservation. Rose feels the review process itself is the problem.
Some of the expenditures that businesses have to spend in order to keep a certain look. And so I've had an instance where a business owner reached out. They put in a certain window, and historic preservation officer said, that's not historic. You need to replace it. And what was the $20,000 window turned into a $60,000. So it's the financial impact. And it's not that that's a misconception that the board has denied activities. What happens is when an investor or a developer comes in and they're wanting to do something, when they start hearing the financial impact, in order to keep some of the historic looks and the historic features, they walk away. So there are dozens of projects that never even make it to the historic preservation because you have an initial intake, you have an initial conversation, and you see the financial impact, and you're like, yeah, I can go invest somewhere else.
How will shifting the development approval from the Historic Preservation Board to the Appearance Review Board help to stimulate new business in the district?
So what the ARB is very intentional on is looking at, there are rules, because I used to be the recording secretary, there are rules that you have to somewhat look like your surrounding neighborhoods. And so that's a critical portion of this entire project. You know, downtown Orlando continues to face significant challenges, including like our vacant properties, underutilized buildings, declining foot traffic. And so this will allow the opportunity for us to see if the processes are discouraging development.
You mentioned some of the fees that some of these developers and small business owners are having to deal with. Talk about what you've been hearing from them regarding what other tools they need to get these businesses off the ground to help jumpstart that downtown activity.
So we have the tools in place. So we've got the retail and restaurant program. We've got facade programs. But think about it, right? If there's a limited amount of funds that can help with those costs. And so what this will allow the opportunity is, how do we look at you upgrading your building, you doing your facade that is financially feasible, because then again, you still have to go through the process of actually opening the business. So this allows the opportunity for business owners to really focus on the overall building structure and the actual business structure, as opposed to saying they've got to do these major investments in the building, which most of them will probably lease the space, will allow the opportunity to reinvest in our downtown and will help to fulfill and fill some of the empty buildings.
What do you say to Orlando residents who are concerned that this will give developers a free pass to really renovate and strip away some of that historic identity?
So one of the things that we were intentional on is providing a REAP tax rebate, which is part of this is a new program. And so we're looking at, yes, it's important for us to preserve our history. And so that, the focus is creating a more vibrant, economically healthy downtown that serves everybody. And so empty buildings become an issue. I get messages, whether I'm getting tagged on social media, emails about the empty buildings and what are we doing. And so we're heavily invested in our downtown and making it a better downtown. And so what that means is, what have we heard from investors who want to do? What have we heard from property owners who have vacant buildings who they can't lease? And so this has been collective conversation that through time, because we continue to have quarterly business meetings, hearing from our establishments downtown, where we're saying, okay, what can we do to make things better? Well, I can't lease, and I'll give you an example. Well, I can't lease this space because this is what the investment is. And I've tried and no one wants to be bothered. So this is part of our overall letting everyone know, downtown is safe. We're creating a vibrant place for everyone. And we will work towards keeping historic preservation and preserving the buildings, which is why we do have an incentive program.
Now, the state is pushing back. Florida's Division of Historic Resources has threatened to withhold certifications that open up grant funding for the city. How do you see this interaction playing out?
So that the specific of that certification, there are other major cities that do not have the certification. Specifically, it will allow us to waive a match. So it's not like we're not a historic community, we won't be eligible for grants. That's the misconception of how that letter reads. It's for the specific that certification allows us to waive a match grant, which was stated during council. It's only been used twice, and we've gotten $50,000 each time. That's specifically for a match waiver. It's not for not receiving grant funding from the state.
Commissioner Rose, as an Orlando resident, what does the historic identity of the city mean to you?
The old adage saying is, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you come from. We have been very intentional on telling stories, making sure the community knows about what exists, what used to be, what is, and where we're going. And so we don't lose. A building doesn't necessarily define the history. It's telling our stories, capturing our stories is what's important. And we do a very good job of that. In fact, we just unveiled a sign yesterday where we're preserving history of a program that exists here in the Paramore community. So historic preservation is a key priority, which is why we intentionally tell our stories.
Opponents to the suspension argued that this moratorium will open the door for developers to move forward with projects that would compromise the historic integrity of the district, projects that may include full demolitions. Scott Seidler is a contractor specializing in historic restoration and a former chair of Orlando's Historic Preservation Board.
You're removing protections from some of your most treasured pieces of history to study what happens. That's like leaving the henhouse open to investigate whether the fox will come.
Patty Sheehan is District 4's commissioner on the City Council and a fierce defender of historic preservation in Orlando. Sheehan also spoke with Engage yesterday and explained why she voted against suspending the historic review process.
You do a historic district for a reason, to protect historic areas from predatory development like is happening right now. And you don't do away with the historic district. You need to do away with the bad developers. Because of this decision, we could lose millions of dollars in funding from the state of Florida. And we've already been put on notice that we could potentially lose our certification for historic preservation that would entitle us to those. I just think this is a terrible idea. We were a certified local government with the state of Florida, which allowed us to access millions of dollars in historic funding, which helped us save the Black Bottom Church, which was the roof caved in. We've done the Wells Built Museum. We've done Lou Gardens. We have used this funding for our historic resources. And when the mayor said this money is de minimis, I disagree. I do not believe that millions of dollars in funding to save historic resources is de minimis. I also do not agree with his premise that this is going to do something about the empty storefronts. We have empty storefronts in all of the brand new buildings. The problem is these developers are charging way too much in rent. They could be getting really good uses in there if they simply would change their pro forma and start getting businesses into these empty storefronts. It's not historic preservation that's creating the problem. There are empty storefronts all up and down Orange Avenue and every new building that's been constructed downtown in the last 20 years.
So why do you think that the supporters of this are bearing down on historic preservation as a pivot point on addressing the vacancies downtown?
I think that honestly, I think this is a windfall for a couple of developers that own property on Church Street, honestly. I've also voted no on the Church Street streetscape. I was there on the dais reading everything, and right there it clicked, and I put two and two together. I'm like, wait a minute. If these guys are going to have the ability to tear down, and it's two developers that own the Phase 1 Church Street streetscape. This is only benefiting two developers. If we're going to allow them to tear the buildings down, why should we do a streetscape? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, a streetscape paid for by the CRA that benefits an historic district is a public benefit. A streetscape that benefits two developers who want to tear down our historic buildings, they should have to at least pay for the streetscape. So I just think there's a whole lot of bad judgment going on here, and I'm not happy with it. I will continue to vote against it. And I think it needs to be. Shown that this is unacceptable. This historic district has been there for 47 years. It's not the reason for blight in downtown. They took a picture when the staff did their presentation. They took a picture of the ugliest building on Church Street, which isn't even a historic building.
You mentioned that you feel that one of the things that's driving the vacancies downtown is the increased rents. How would you address that with the property owners?
Well, this is the problem. They do, from what I've talked to some of my friends in commercial real estate, they do what's called a pro forma when they get their financing. And so they put a certain amount of square foot, a certain amount of rent that they can get per square foot for retail. Well, it's not working, that they're not filling the spaces because the rent's too high. So my suggestion is to just lower the rents. It's like, I don't know how to tell business people how to do their business, but if you can't rent something at a certain rate, lower the rate until you get someone in there. And why not go to other cities where they do have an active, vibrant, historic district downtown and see what their best practices are? Don't throw away the historic district.
Commissioner Sheehan, to you personally, what does the history of Orlando mean when you are traveling within your own districts? What are the hallmarks that pop out to you?
What makes these neighborhoods so special is you have homes from the 1800s that the homeowners have lovingly restored. Yeah, we'll get a homeowner in there that doesn't want to follow the rules, and we tell them you have to follow the historic preservation rules. There's a reason we have that. It's to save and create that sense of space. And I love Lake Eola Heights. I loved Lake Eola Heights when I was a kid, when we used to drop my dad off downtown. I thought those houses were beautiful. They weren't in the best repair at the time. The historic district has created a great deal of investment and people that want to live there. But I can even remember being a kid and just loving the old buildings. And I have, Cherokee Historic District. I have beautiful older homes that people are consider themselves stewards of, and they lovingly restore and keep their homes up. And it creates a sense of space. It creates walkable, beautiful neighborhoods. And it's not the cookie cutter houses one after another. It's the same that you get in every subdivision, in Florida. These houses were each built by individual architects. They all are special. Same thing with our downtown. If you look at the facades of these buildings, they're beautiful. I mean, the Bumpy Hardware building, the First National Bank, the Crest building, they all have crenellation, they have decoration on them. They have high quality limestone finishes. Unlike all the junk that, does everything have to be glass and steel? Just because you tear a building down and build a new building does not mean that you're going to get occupancy. We need to study why these new buildings and why these developers can't get people into downtown.
Orlando's Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board will meet next month to discuss potential tax incentives for developers and property owners to preserve the exteriors of the district's historic buildings.
Engage is a production of Central Florida Public Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Richard Copeland is our senior producer. I'm Sharon Stone. You can reach us anytime with questions, comments, or story ideas. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Thanks for listening.